Scrubbing blood from any surface is harder than you expect. It gets under your nails before you realize it, and the smell hangs in the air, poisoning the room. I remember going through the motions in shock the morning after all of this happened, methodically scraping away at the floor and walls until everything was clean. At the same time, it's also easy, in an unsettling way. Generic bleach cleaner and dish soap works perfectly fine. I had to put the sheets into the garbage, though there was no salvaging those. I ended up sitting alone in my spotless bedroom, surrounded by a heap of bloody rags while trying to make sense of what I had seen the night before. Anyway, I'm getting ahead of myself. I met my freshman year roommate for the first time the weekend before classes started. We found each other on Instagram. I'm Emma and you're Gemma. Isn't that cool? We were both math majors and read the same books, so I figured I might as well take my chances compared to a random assignment. It made sense that choosing someone with common interests was statistically less likely to end in disaster. Gemma was half a head taller than me, with elegant features and perfect blonde hair that fell down her back in waves. She had a cold sense to her, with a resting face sullen enough that it looked like a permanent glare at first glance. But when she smiled, it softened her angles into something more approachable. Everything about her made me a little envious and a bit self-conscious, and I wished I could carry the same gravity with me when I walked into a room. The first week of classes passed without incident, and I tried to force myself out of my shell, talking to as many people as possible and trying fruitlessly to remember all their names. Gemma and I didn't spend as much time together as we had over the first weekend, but we still hung out and watched TV together at night. It was strange being away from her, but I fell into the routine, taking comfort in wrapping myself in blankets and drifting to sleep at the end of each day. Chatter from the hallway leaked through the thin walls late into the night, but I was tired enough that it didn't matter. My bed was in the corner of the room, and the presence of a wall right next to me gave me an odd sense of security. At least, until Saturday. I thought I was getting into the swing of things. Gemma had been staying out later than I had the few nights before, and I trusted her to be quiet when she came into the room. I went ahead and crawled into bed, hearing her enter minutes later. I tossed and turned as she went to sleep, her breathing evening out and falling into a steady rhythm. It was then that I heard it, a knock, coming from the other side of my wall, a few feet above my head. I jerked up, turning to see if Gemma had heard it. She was still fast asleep, the noise too soft to hear across the room. The sound came again. 2 clear taps. Knock, knock. It sent chills down my spine, and I curled into my pillow, wondering if I should check the peephole. Maybe it was someone I knew. But the knock was on the wall, not the door. I was sure of it, and there was no more chatter in the hallway. Eventually, the exhaustion of the day caught up to me. I woke up with my blankets twisted around me, my shirt sticking to my skin with sweat. A sense of unease remained in my mind, and I couldn't pinpoint what caused it. At that point, the knocking seemed like a faint dream, and I didn't believe it was real until I heard it again the next night. Knock, knock. I lay perfectly still, Gemma's inhale-exhale on loop anchoring me to reality. The night before, I had brushed it off as my brain imagining things, but the tapping continued, repeating over and over. Knock, 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 knock. I was fed up. I threw the covers off me and peered through the peephole, not seeing anyone outside. The knocking was fainter when it wasn't next to the wall, but I could still hear it. Maybe whoever it was just out of my field of vision. As soon as the door creaked open, the sound stopped. I craned my head past the doorway, taking in the expanse of the hall. It was completely empty. I gave up and went back to bed. The sound started up again immediately, moving down the wall until it was right next to my head. I shoved all my pillows between me and the wall and clapped my hands over my ears, curling into a ball and staying there until sleep overtook me. When it kept happening, I tried talking to Gemma about it. I keep hearing a knocking on the wall at night. I brought up hesitantly one afternoon. She looked at me strangely. That's weird, she said. I didn't notice anything like that. I didn't know what else to do, so I just nodded awkwardly and walked away. We got along fine, but we weren't close enough that I could ask to swap beds for a night or something similar. I tried waking her up one night when it became too loud for me to sleep. When I walked over to her side of the room, tiptoeing to avoid tripping over my feet in the dark, I could still hear the sound, although fainter. "Hey," I whispered. "Wake up for a second. Can you hear that?"
She opened an eye clearly and then glared at me.
Trying to concentrate. After a moment, she shook her head. "I can't hear anything. Stop bothering me." She pulled the covers over her head and turned away. I cursed under my breath, convinced that the knocking had stopped on purpose as soon as I brought it up with her. I felt guilty about it the next morning, so I tried to make sure she wasn't upset about it. "Sorry about last night," I said sheepishly. "I hope I didn't mess up your sleep." "It's fine," she shrugged. "I didn't hear anything, though." Time passed quickly, and before I knew it, half the semester was over. The knocking continued nightly, although at this point it had become routine to me. I tried to assuage my spiraling thoughts that something would jump out and attack me, even if there is a monster on the other side. Gemma's intimidating enough that it'll probably be scared off by her before it can attack us. I laughed about it to myself. Back then, I wish it would have stayed a joke. I felt a sense of unease around me as the weather started getting colder. Gemma talked to me less and less, and stopped smiling completely. I didn't know what I could have done wrong. Once, I asked her how her day was, and she ignored me, walking out of the room minutes later while muttering under her breath. We started avoiding each other, and I tensed up every time she entered the room. Brusque and angry with her lips, always pulled into a frown. Hostility permeating the air, even though she hadn't done anything to make me afraid. It was just really awkward. She seemed to pretend I didn't exist, turning on the TV before I was awake, and almost making me fall out of the bed with how loud it was. She'd blast music too, enough that it could be heard through the door and halfway down the hallway. Her frosty demeanor almost made me scared to be in the room. But there weren't any friends I was close enough to that I could camp out with them every evening. I tried to convince myself that I was overreacting. She was just a person, and all that her chilly attitude was doing was making my college experience a little uncomfortable. Through all of this, the knocking kept appearing without fail every night. Eventually, I was fed up enough to try investigating. Someone is knocking on the wall, and then disappearing. Whenever I check the peephole, it's empty, and there aren't any footsteps. Either I had the horrible thought that something could be in the wall, but chased it out of my head. The frame was only a few inches across. There was no way anything living could fit inside of it. The same day, as I was getting ready for bed, Gemma opened the closet door right into my face. It hit me square in the nose and I cried out, stinging pain prickling around my eyes and forehead. She continued as if nothing had happened, and I was so frustrated I could have screamed. Gemma didn't come back to the room that night, and I felt lonelier than ever, sad and angry enough to act foolishly. I knocked back. When the tapping started, I reached up to the wall and rapped it gently, echoing the sound. The knocking stopped abruptly, and I was left in complete silence for a second before it accelerated. So fast it seemed like something was exciting. Knock, 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 knock. I woke up in the morning blinking hazy images from my memories, dreams of being pulled into a dark void, an endless array of limbs wrapping around me and dragging me further into the black. I was terrified that somehow I had opened the door, and whatever was inside my walls knew that I was on the other side, soft and vulnerable. I didn't see Gemma around much anymore. Usually, we would run into each other a couple times in the afternoons and evenings. But at this point, it was a surprise to me if I saw her before I went to sleep. Whenever she came inside, she was brusque and perpetually furious, and her demeanor set my heart on edge. Finals were approaching quickly, and I tried to reach out to every acquaintance I had made over the course of a few weeks, hoping I could pull myself out of my funk and finish the semester strong. I had to remind myself every night that there was no reason to be afraid, and my thoughts cycled between various lines of reasoning. Often, I would respond to whatever was on the other side of my wall like it was a friend, only to receive indecipherable knocks in return. Other times, if something's living in there, I hope it goes for Gemma first. I still feel guilty about that one. Fast forward to last week, when it all came to a head. I woke up in the middle of the night covered in sweat, my hair sticking to the back of my shirt uncomfortably. Next to me, the knocking was louder than it had ever been before, which was strange, because it tended to be quiet if I ever woke up in the middle of the night. I looked over to my bedside table, fumbling for my glasses for a second before giving up and squinting at the clock. 3:03 a.m. I glanced up. Ģeʟma was standing over me, a knife poised over my chest. Her lips were pulled into either a smile or a grimace, but it was too blurry to tell. I screamed and rolled off the bed, and the blade caught the edge of my shirt, slicing into my shoulder. I couldn't see the wound very clearly, but warmth trickled down my skin, adrenaline distracting me from the pain. She lunged at me again, and I dodged, colliding with the side of the bed and stumbled. I ran for the door fruitlessly, hoping to swipe at the light switch, but she grabbed me by the back of my shirt, throwing me against the wall. I gasped out something along the lines of, "Why are you doing this? What's gotten into you?" She didn't bother with a response, moving once again to drive the knife into my heart. I flailed and twisted a doorknob open, diving into my closet and holding the door closed with every ounce of strength I had. The door frame rattled as she attempted to wrench it open, and I could only watch in fear as the hopeless tug of war slid in her favor. I let go, aiming for the door to fly open and knock her back, but she must have been anticipating, digging the blade into my side as I ran into the room and dragging it backwards. I clutched my hand to my waist, trying to staunch the bleeding as my side erupted in fire, the pain finally overpowering the endorphins. Ģeʟma's movements were erratic, and she swung the knife in wild arcs through the air. I saw an opportunity and drove my fist into her stomach. There was a clatter as the knife dropped to the floor, and I kicked it away, planning to make a beeline for the door and call for help while she was distracted. It was no use. Ģeʟma was taller and stronger than me, and I regretted staying curled up on my bed the entire semester instead of working out as her hands wrapped around my throat and started to squeeze. I slapped my hands uselessly against her chest and face, but it didn't faze her, and spots appeared in my field of vision. The rest is a twisted blur to me. Somehow, I could hear the knocking again. That's not right. I thought as my life was slowly ripped from my lungs. That's too loud. Shouldn't be possible. An explosion of noise. A massive, overwhelming tearing. A whirlwind of limbs and eyes and teeth burst out of the wall, pulling Ģeʟma off of me as if she were a piece of paper. I couldn't quite comprehend what I was seeing. It was tall, taller than the room.
Then we were already rattling to and arms around with flashing wood.
Dots of light that could have been eyes and jagged seams with teeth poking out lined it from head to toe. It tore into her, a blur of gory red. Ģeʟma fell limp. The creature retreated back into the wall and pulled her in with it, leaving me frozen to the floor in shock. I sat there for hours, unmoving, until exhaustion took over and I collapsed to the ground. I woke up a few hours later to see the wall intact, with no indication that some inexplicable being had made its home inside. Thankfully, I hadn't bled out, and the jagged wounds on my waist and shoulders were mostly clotted shut. I cleaned up all of the blood and showered, going about my day on autopilot. The knocking was still there. The next couple nights, though it was softer, "Are you still there?" it seemed to be asking. I was too scared to respond at first, but I gave in on the last time I slept in that room, tapping twice. "Thank you." I hope it understood me. My room change form went through for the following semester. Much to my relief, the police did come by after finals, with Ģeʟma's absence from every exam being suspicious enough to declare her missing. I denied seeing her, and they didn't inquire any further. I still don't know what the creature was, or where it came from. It might still be there. Maybe there are more, an array of inhuman beings taking up in-between spaces, listening for a friendly voice, or maybe it was entirely random, and I had just as much of a chance of being taken as she did. Either way, I'm praying that my mind is playing tricks on me. It's been 2 weeks since this semester started, and I swear I heard knocking again the other night. The thing is, my new room is a single. Wish me luck. Are you really that afraid of the basement? My boyfriend was busy putting on his blue button shirt as he asked me casually. I glared back at him. "You're seriously going to bring this up now?" I'm busy getting ready for brunch, I said grumpily, pulling on my bra. He shrugged apologetically. Look, I'm sorry, okay? I just want to know why, especially if it's such a big issue. We can talk about it whenever you want, but I would really like to talk about it eventually. His tone was calm and filled with sincere concern. I sighed. I felt my annoyance slip. I had been avoiding this subject for so long. I really didn't want to bring up my past, but Timothy had been so great. We'd been living together for over a year now, and he'd been very patient with me and my phobia of dark places. I don't just mean I'm afraid of the dark. I mean I go into full-on panic attack mode and start tearing the walls apart with my bare hands and fingernails and teeth if it gets even close to dark in any room I'm in. It makes going out at night, or doing anything normal, like going to the cinema, or planetarium, or club, or bar, very difficult. I have a nightlight in every room in my apartment, and also plenty of backups, plus flashlights, candles, lighters, a pound of fresh batteries of all sizes. Of course, my smartphone can also function as a flashlight. I could go on, but suffice to say, I am surrounded by light as much as possible. This was also why we were meeting Tim's parents for brunch in broad daylight and not dinner. Never dinner. I didn't leave the house once it got too close to sunset. I mostly drive wherever I need to go. Taking public transport is too risky, and I don't travel very much or very far. I also cannot enter a bathroom that has no natural light and nothing but motion sensor-based lights. If they go out for just a second, my heart races. My blood boils from fear and my lungs burn from panic. I scream and run, crying usually until I'm back in the light. I was very lucky to have Timothy around. Unlike my previous boyfriends, he never made snide remarks about my phobia, even when it disrupted his schedule. His effortless patience was a stark contrast to my previous relationships. I had never seen him so much as raise his voice. I slowly sat on the edge of our bed. Okay, Tim, I'll tell you why. Right now, actually, if you'd like. We have a few minutes, and it's not a very long story anyway. Timothy quickly pulled on his last sock and came over to sit next to me. I looked at him and then looked back down at the bed. I've never told this to anyone, but the reason I'm so afraid of the dark, of being alone, is because of what happened to me in the basement when I was 10 years old. I paused and Tim took my hand. His fingers were rough and warm. I'd never had issues with the dark or the basement or anything like that ever before. One day, my mom asked me to go down and fetch the laundry from the dryer. So, I've been down in the basement of this house a billion times, and I think nothing of this at all. The door creaked loudly, just like normal, as I opened it. I lazily walked down the steps and was busy messing around with my new Walkman when I suddenly heard the door slam behind me. I yelped and was plunged into darkness so pure I thought I'd gone blind. I groped in the darkness for the light switch. I heard it click as the light bulb buzzed to life noisily. As I spoke, I could feel my heartbeat begin to accelerate. I could picture that basement now. That bare light bulb. My hands shook. Tim noticed this and began to caress my hand comfortingly. I continued. The basement wasn't that big or fancy. Nothing but bare concrete. We used it to store some old furniture and photo albums. Of course, we kept our laundry down there too. I was a bit spooked by the door slamming, so I decided to get the chore over with fast. However, as my foot left the last step and touched the cold concrete floor, the light bulb glowed. It glowed so brightly that it burst. I screamed from fright as I was plunged into darkness again. It was also so quiet. The distant sound of my parents or brother now extinguished. All I could hear was my own breathing. I paused again to catch my breath. It had been a long time since I told this story. All the memories that came with it filled me with terror. I moved in the direction of the laundry. I waved my hands in front of my face but could see nothing. I knew that there was a flashlight in the drawer of the desk next to the dryer. I took a few tentative steps, expecting any minute to feel bright pain explode through my hip as I bumped into the desk. But I never did. So, I started taking bigger steps. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up. I realized that something was horribly wrong. I should have been on the other side of the room by then. A few steps after that, I should have been on the other side of the wall. Before I knew it, I was running. No, I was sprinting, hoping to be lucky enough to slam hard into the wall, to prove this nightmare a fake. But the wall never came. I ran through cold darkness. Then I heard a voice. A soft whisper. It was the voice of a man. There was nothing abnormal about his voice at all, but it gave me goosebumps. He warned me never to return to the dark. He warned me never to tell anyone. My lips trembled, but I continued, my voice shaking. By then I was beyond fear and incredulity. How could this be possible? Where was I? I yelped and shielded my eyes because it was suddenly blindingly bright, and I felt really cramped, like the room had just shrunk. Then strong hands were grabbing me and lifting me, and I found myself being pulled from a well. Tim's eyebrows shot up into his hairline at this point, but he remained quiet. We still have no idea how, but some men had heard a noise, and once they'd seen me, they rescued me immediately. They found me in a well that was hundreds of miles from my house, from that damn basement. I paused again, rubbing my temples with the tips of my trembling fingers. I had to go to therapy, and no one could ever explain anything. Like I said before, I never mentioned what really happened to anyone. I didn't know whether I was more afraid of people thinking I was crazy, or if I was really more afraid of that voice. All I said was that I blacked out on my way down the stairs. The therapist said I may have gone into a fugue state or something, which basically means they don't have a goddamn clue what the hell happened to me. I continued to go to therapy for years and years, but it never helped. I felt I could never tell anyone the truth. Anyway, it all ended up in the papers, and my family and I had to move to a whole new town. After that, it was just kind of swept under the rug, and people stopped asking questions. My parents never bring it up. They pretend it didn't happen. I like to do that too. So now that I've told you, I don't want to hear another word about it. And if you tease me or prank me, so help me God, I'll dump your ass. I was trying to make a joke to help break the tension, but I could feel myself shaking more and more as I recounted the story. It had been some time since I'd thought about that traumatizing day. I felt tears form in the corners of my eyes, but quickly blinked them away. Tim sat silently and still, his expression one of sympathy and concern. Wow, I had no idea. That sounds really horrifying, my dear. I completely understand your fears now. I'm feeling a bit less fond of the dark too. He kissed me lightly on the forehead and rubbed my arm. I looked up at him with disbelief. You don't think I'm crazy? You believe me? He smiled warmly. Of course I do. I can totally believe this universe is full of strange, unexplainable, sometimes horrifying stuff. He paused and looked into my eyes. But are you still okay for brunch with my folks? We can always reschedule and get McDonald's or something. Watch some DuckTales? I smiled at him and chuckled. That's tempting, but no. No. We've booked a table and everything. Besides, it's too short notice now to cancel. Let's get going soon. I feel okay. It was a long time ago. Tim glanced at me in a way that showed he was wholly unconvinced. But he yielded. Okay, my dear. I'll just take the trash down quickly. Meet you downstairs. A few minutes later, I had my makeup on and was waiting downstairs on the ground floor. Tim had left ahead of me to take the trash to the refuse bins in the basement, and I had expected him to be waiting for me already. But he wasn't there. I frowned, confused. Is he still downstairs? Why is he taking so long? I tried to keep my panic in check, but as the minutes ticked by, my heart began to thump loudly. No. There's no such thing as the dark place. There's no such thing as the monster in the basement. I stammered to myself softly as I tried to force the panic back down into the recesses of my stomach. I couldn't end that thought. What if by telling him the truth I had put him in danger? The voice had said not to tell anyone. I thought that it would only be angry at me, but now I'm starting to think otherwise. My blood was electrified with terror as I took a small step toward the stairs. The stairway was curved so that the door was hidden. I craned my neck and peered around the corner. The large, metal basement door was shut. Tim, is everything okay? My voice shook slightly as I spoke, but it was firm and loud. Silence pressed against my ears. I pulled my phone out of my bag. With the tap of a button, a small but bright flashlight switched on and illuminated the hallway. I turned the flashlight toward the stairs. With shaky hands, I took a step forward and started to descend. I halted after 3 steps. I felt dizzy now. Tim, this isn't funny. I'm really freaking... Then I heard it. Gotta. I tripped and hit my head. I heard him groan in pain. I think I twisted my ankle. I really need some help. My fear instantly dissipated. Tim was hurt badly. His voice sounded really worried. If he'd been unconscious this whole time, he'd need serious medical attention. Shit! Why had I waited so long to check on him? Of course, there's no such thing as monsters. I hurried down the stairs and grabbed the door handle heavily as I pulled it open. Complete. Utter darkness pressed up against my eyes, and I felt an unnatural coldness in the air. The basement door swung back and slammed into me so hard I felt myself fly through the air. I hit the ground hard and yelled with pain and surprise. The impact knocked my phone from hand, and I heard it smash as its light went out. What the hell? I stammered, my head swimming with confusion. Tim? Timothy? I whimpered in the pure darkness. I was sitting on the hard, damp floor, which was the only other thing I could sense besides the horrendous cold, my soft sobs and the musty smell. Then a gloomy light bloomed to life. My jaw dropped open in horror. It couldn't be possible. There, many yards in front of me, too far to be possible, a single bare light bulb was hanging. Its light was cold and small. It looked almost exactly like the light from my old basement. As I looked down, I yelled and began to wail loudly. Lying in the pool of light beneath the bulb was the mutilated, bloodied corpse of my dear, sweet Timothy, the man who I had loved more than anything, the man I had wanted to marry, the man who always made me feel safe, the man who knew exactly how I liked my coffee and pancakes. His gray eyes were empty as they stared at me. Gone was that perennial warmth of love. His body was covered in deep scratches and blood soaked his clothes. Oh my God! He was dead. Guilt, terror, and pain of all kinds washed over me. Tears poured down my face and I yelled incomprehensibly, pleading for someone to help. Without warning, another identical light bulb appeared before the first. My whimpering paused. Then another, and another. My eyes widened with terror. Soon, hundreds of lights were blooming into existence like frigid, miniature stars. The line of lights made a beeline towards me, with the final bulb flickering to life above my head. I heard the sizzle and hum of its electromagnetic field. I was frozen from fear. I had no idea what to do. My eyes burned with tears and I screamed. Suddenly there was a loud pop. A bulb had exploded and I shouted from fright. I gazed down the line of lights and gasped. At first all I saw were the shards of broken glass and the remnants of the broken bulb above. It had been the bulb right at the far end. My gaze shifted. A humanoid silhouette stood beneath the broken bulb. My heart stopped dead. No, 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 I moaned softly, my brain unable to process my terror. Then the next bulb in the line burst, and the man instantaneously stood beneath it. One light closer to me. I screamed from fear and found myself clambering to my feet. I had to get out of here. As I struggled to stand in my panic, I heard another loud pop as the next bulb blew. Then the next exploded. Suddenly all the bulbs were exploding one after the other, louder and louder. I saw the silhouette get closer and closer, as swift as a shadow. No! Stay the hell away from me! I screamed as bile forced its way into my mouth. My heart screamed from panic. As I turned, I heard a soft, raspy voice say, "We warned you." With tears flooding my face, I groped wildly for the basement door. I could feel someone standing right behind me. I yelled with delighted surprise as my hand grasped the door handle. I heaved the door open and ran screaming up the stairs and out of the building. I continued to run and scream as I welcomed the feel of warm, sticky summer air on my skin. I'd never been so happy to see the calm blue sky and the vicious midday sun. I ended up being taken to a hospital by a bunch of cops who'd seen me yelling and crying as I ran down the street. My face and clothes were covered in dirt, and my knees and elbows were scratched, but otherwise I was unharmed. I did not dare tell them the truth. Instead, I said I'd had a panic attack triggered by going down into the basement to find Timothy. The police searched the entire building, but the only thing they found in the basement that proved Timothy had been there at all was the trash bag he'd taken down. At this time, the police have no leads. I miss Tim so much. I feel a numbness where he should be. I keep expecting him to be just around the next corner. His parents refuse to answer my calls. On the other hand, my parents won't stop calling. Suffice to say, I cannot even think about the dark without bursting into tears. Even if there was hope for psychological recovery, I don't think it matters. I still feel like someone is standing behind me constantly. The feeling is especially strong when my back faces a lightless room. I'm never alone now. They are always watching me, waiting for me to return to the dark. I've kept all the lights on constantly and have not left my apartment in days. But no matter how long I wait, I can still feel it. I'm not even surprised. After all, I had not heeded the dark's warning. Certainly, never forgive me. I've always been a skeptic. Ghosts, demons, monsters, all just products of overactive imaginations, right? That's what I used to think until last fall when I went camping with a friend in a remote forest. We were looking for an escape from our busy lives and figured a weekend in the wilderness would be perfect. We arrived at the campsite late in the afternoon, set up our tent, and gathered wood for a fire. As night fell, the forest grew eerily quiet. We talked and laughed around the fire, but as the hours passed, an unsettling feeling crept over me. I couldn't shake the sensation of being watched. Around midnight, we decided to turn in. My friend was out like a light, but I lay awake, staring at the tent ceiling. That's when I heard it, a rustling just outside the tent. At first, I thought it was an animal, but then I heard a low, guttural whisper, mimicking my friend's voice, calling my name. I shook my friend awake, heart pounding. "Did you hear that?" I whispered. My friend listened for a moment, then shrugged it off as my imagination. But I knew what I heard. Determined to prove I wasn't crazy, I grabbed a flashlight and unzipped the tent. The beam of light cut through the darkness, revealing nothing but trees and shadows. I stepped out, scanning the area, but everything seemed normal. I was about to turn back when I saw movement out of the corner of my eye. I swung the flashlight around and froze. There, at the edge of the clearing, stood a figure. It looked like my friend, but something was off. The movements were jerky, unnatural, and the eyes, those eyes were empty, void of any humanity. The figure smiled, a chilling, predatory smile, and then it spoke in a distorted version of my friend's voice, calling my name again. Panic set in. I stumbled back into the tent and zipped it up, my hands shaking. I told my friend what I saw, but they insisted I was just tired and seeing things. Reluctantly, I lay back down, every sound outside now amplified in my mind. The next morning, we decided to cut the trip short. As we packed up, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. We left the forest, and I tried to forget what I saw, convincing myself it was a hallucination. Weeks later, I was at home when I heard a knock on my door. I opened it to find my friend standing there, looking exhausted and terrified. They told me they had seen the same figure outside their window, mimicking my voice, calling their name. It followed them home. We decided to research what we encountered and came across stories about skinwalkers, creatures from Native American legends that could mimic voices and appearances to lure victims. The descriptions matched our experiences perfectly. Then came the twist I never saw coming. One night, while trying to calm my friend over the phone, I heard a faint noise behind me. I turned around to see my friend standing in the doorway, the same empty eyes and predatory smile as the figure in the forest. I realized too late the terrifying truth. The friend I had been talking to all this time, the one who had been followed home, wasn't my friend. They had been replaced by the skinwalker that night in the forest. And now, it was my turn to run.